Very warm welcome to all of our attendees to this Tuesday morning Toolbox Talk. As always, we start with the tips to continually prevent COVID-19, and that would be to wash your hands regularly. That is using soap and water for at least 20 seconds. And then if this is not available, please keep an alcohol-based hand sanitizer available at all times. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth with an unwashed hand, and also adhere to your social distancing measures, especially when people are sick, to try and avoid contact with them. Cover your cough or sneeze with a flexed elbow or tissue. Make sure that we throw that tissue into the bin. And this is a very important one, cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched objects and surfaces so that we avoid that cross-contamination between ourselves and others around us. If you haven't done so yet, please get vaccinated or adhere to your company's policy on vaccination as well. So as we come up to the end of November, we are looking at Arrive Alive, and that is why we will also keep that as our safety thought for this week moving forward. Arrive Alive. In fact, it's something that we want to do throughout the December period. The reason why we have Arrive Alive as our Toolbox Talk, not only is it vital for us to have safe driving measures when driving on public roads during all days throughout the year, we want to especially take note of this in December because the roads are going to be a lot busier. People are going to be a lot more relaxed since they're wanting to go on holiday. And then the returning from holiday as well is a very important one that we want you to look out for, because people are going to be enjoying themselves. A lot of people drink and drive, and so we want to avoid accidents that lead to deaths on our roads. So please take a look at that slogan, Arrive Alive, and remember the zero is no accident safety slogan that we always want to remind you about. So let's take a look at some tips on driving safely, and this again can be used across the board. It can be used day-to-day driving. Throughout this week, we want you to implement these specific tips that you're going to be getting with your driving habits. And then also try and take a look at some of the tips and remember this then for December. Obviously, as Byron mentioned, these are recorded. So if it's something you need to listen to again during the December period, or perhaps you know somebody that might be a bit of a reckless driver, maybe you can share this with them. The first thing you want to do is always plan the journey. So planning the journey means that you know where you want to go, you know the time that you want to get there, and you also know the distance so that you can start planning to get from point A to point B safely. So the first thing you want to do is obey the road rules. Now, speeding is obviously one of the main things that gets broken every single day. And when this happens, you've got a higher risk and a higher chance of incidents and accidents happening on our roads. So planning the road trip, we know going down to Durban, if you're going down to the beachfront, there's a certain area that you get into KZN where it drops down from 120 to 100 to 80. Sometimes it even goes down to 60 at some points, and then it varies between 80 and 100 almost all the way into KZN or down to Durban actually. And yet there's always speeding on that road. Now, if this does happen, and a lot of times, we see cars rushing past us, what do we want to do? Well, just allow the person to pass you. So obey the road rules from your side, because that is the most important thing. Never try and keep a reckless driver in and around you or boxed in, because you're just keeping the risk near you. Allow them just to go past you, because there's nothing really you can do about that. But when you plan your route to your holiday destination, make sure that you give yourself enough time to reach there, because there's going to be normal stops, scheduled stops, such as getting food and also taking rest breaks. Perhaps you need to get to bathrooms or stock up on snacks while you're driving. But there might even be unscheduled stops. Maybe there's a possibility of a flat tire. There could be an accident on the road that you need to stop behind. Anything could happen on that road, and then your time could be delayed. So you never want to really drive at night, which is obviously always a good idea to try and get there safely during the day. Planning the route will then assist you with the time frame that it's going to take you to get from where you are to your destination. It's a good idea to use a GPS navigation tool. I often use Google Maps. I know a lot of friends of mine with Apple iPhones, they use maps on theirs, and it gives you alerts all the time. So it's constantly updating, and I find it almost to be 99% accurate. So I always use it. Even when I drive currently where we're driving at the moment, I've always got the GPS on, even if I know where I'm going. And the reason is, if there is an accident, if there's an area of concern, it will give me that notification to tell me that there's an area that I'm going into that could be potentially dangerous, or there could be an accident and there's delays on that road. Then I can make a decision whether I want to now go a different route, or if I'm just going to leave earlier than I thought I was going to leave, so that I can get there still on time. So using that GPS navigation tool, it's not making us lazy. We're not saying anybody's lazy or you don't know where you're going, but it is a great tool to find out what is actually happening ahead of you. Then for peace of mind, stick to your major routes or toll routes if it's at all possible, because if you're going to travel on the back roads, then you need to identify towns along the route and the distance between them because of the stops that you need to take. Or perhaps there's going to be riots, especially coming up in December period. And then you don't want those smaller roads to be blocked off, and you will not then be able to get from point A to point B on the smaller roads. Now, I know it's happened to me before coming up from Johannesburg. There's been truck riots on the major toll route, and then it was inevitable that you had to go on the back routes. Unfortunately, I didn't plan that trip to go on the back routes. I planned it for the toll route, but I didn't plan for the strike action. And so the alternative route was, first of all, blocked off on the one path that I managed to get to, and I had to backtrack 3.5 hours to where I was and travel another 3.5 hours just to make up additional time. So a trip to Durban almost took me about 12 hours of driving. So it can make someone very frustrated. And obviously this is something you want to avoid altogether. And then you never want to get stranded without fuel. So always plan ahead. Where are you going to stop? And then make alternative arrangements should that be necessary. So planning for the journey, you can see, is not just important from A to B, but also in between. The rest stops that you need to take. It's very important that you actually take rest stops, especially if you're traveling with kids, because it's also helping them to know when you're going to be stopping. So plan with your children, plan with others who you might be driving with. Always ensure a friend or family member who's not traveling with you is aware of your route. And if you are traveling with friends and family, then perhaps make somebody else know where you are traveling. Ideally, you should want to update them on your progress, especially if it's your office, or even currently, if you're working during this week. It's very important to keep in touch with people to let them know that you have either arrived safely or you haven't reached your destination yet. And saying that, please don't use your cell phones while driving. That's not obviously what we're saying. But when you do take those rest stops, then you can update the people that you need to. Obviously, try to avoid driving after dark if possible. If you cannot see the risk, you cannot mitigate the risk. During the day, it's obviously a lot easier to see. We keep our headlights on during the day in any case, but especially at night, you then want to make sure that you're cautious with your headlights. Now, I don't know if you're the same as me, but I hate it when certain drivers have their high beams on, but then when they go down to normal beams, it's set almost as if it's still high beams. And so please, if you can, go and get your car checked. Make sure that you have your car in a good condition. In other words, don't expect others to be as obedient to the law as you are. Rather, just obey the law yourself and don't retaliate to those who do not obey the law. So get your car roadworthy. Make sure that you check your vehicle, all lights, indicators, windscreen wipers, brakes, your steering, your exhaust system, tires, all of that should be carefully examined. And there's a lot of places that will offer these checks before you go on holiday. But obviously, this is a good idea to do throughout the entire year. Good, productive maintenance and preventative maintenance is always valuable for a vehicle. So take your car for a full check, especially before you go through to your holiday destination. And then whatever you are taking with you, please don't overload your vehicle. This can obviously cause the vehicle to run out of control, or you could possibly lose control of your vehicle, especially during the rainy period. There could be slippery roads. There could even be icy roads, depending on where you're going. And you don't ever want to have your car lose control, or you lose control of the vehicle because it is too heavy for the actual road. Then driver fitness. So you've looked after your vehicle, but how about yourself? Obviously, you must always have a very good rest before you embark on your journey. Take safety breaks if you can, every 2 hours or up to 200 kilometers. If you like our family, obviously we need to stop for rest breaks. We get snacks on the route. In fact, we use the actual trip as part of the holiday destination. And so we plan a longer road trip in order to stop at more places that we perhaps haven't seen before. But that also gives us the ability to then stop in more often and get rest breaks as well. Obviously, this is a road rule. Do not drink and drive. Obviously, it's going into the holiday season. You're going to be with family, friends. You're going to be celebrating certain holidays, and you are possibly going to be drinking alcohol. But if you intend to consume alcohol, please make alternative arrangements so that you are not the driver of your vehicle. Often there are areas that you'll get into that is a zero tolerance area. We do understand that certain people that say, well, I can handle my alcohol, so even if I have one or two, I'm still fine. There's nothing wrong with me. Rather, do not take that chance. You are just increasing the risk of something potentially going wrong. And if you are in an accident and it's not your fault, the fact that you might have alcohol in your blood system could potentially be the reason that you are responsible for that accident. Then remain alert at all times and avoid driver distractions. So please don't use your cell phones while driving. Don't text and drive. And I've actually seen people watching YouTube videos and actual movies, Netflix movies, while driving. This is obviously a huge distraction for the driver. So at all possibility, please avoid these types of distractions. Be responsible with seatbelt wearing. Always wear your seatbelt and make sure that everybody else in the vehicle is also wearing their seatbelt. Now, the South African law requires that each passenger of the motor vehicle has a seatbelt and that they are strapped in. Now, please remember, it is the driver's responsibility to make sure all passengers are strapped in. If you are driving with a child that is younger than 14, it is a criminal offense to allow that person or that youngster not to have a seatbelt on while you are driving. So if you have infants or children under the age of 12, they should obviously be traveling in the back seat of the vehicle and always be buckled up. Always just take a look at the directions of that vehicle driver seat or the actual infant seat that you are using, the booster seats that you're using, because these will give you the safety directions on how to best use those products. Now, it is very, very important that you don't just look after yourself while driving. You have to look after those who are in the vehicle with you. So defensive driving, as well as the drivers outside of your vehicle, have a huge impact on your road use. So yes, you are driving safely, but unfortunately, the people around you might not be driving safely themselves. So always drive defensively. Risk takers obviously are collision makers. So if you take the risk, there is a possibility for you creating the actual incident. So rather just be visible. Drive with your headlights on if possible. I know new modern day cars now actually have beams on permanently, and it might not be high beams or low beams. It could just be alternative lights that come on during the day that are almost always on in order to be visible to other road users. Please dip your headlights well before approaching a vehicle, not when they're right in range, and don't switch them back on just before you've passed the car to quickly blind them before you've passed them. It happens to you. It's understandable, but don't retaliate to someone else. Just continue to do what you need to do in order to be safe. Don't succumb to how they drive or others who do not obey the road rules. Again, stay within the speed limit. Be especially alert when approaching any traffic light, intersections, or even level crossings. Might be green, but just keep aware, keep looking around at the surroundings to make sure that it is still safe to continue driving. Only overtake when it is absolutely safe to do so. And remember, if you're going to exceed the speed limit when doing that, you're obviously putting your lives and the lives of those around you in your own hands. Maintain at least 2 seconds of following distance in order to have a proper braking distance. Vehicles are obviously different the more we put weight into them. So depending on what's in the vehicle, you're going to have a vehicle slow down at a lot lower rate compared to a car that is not filled with things. So please remember this when driving. Your vehicle, you drive every single day to and from work. The brakes are going to work differently with your entire family in it and a full boot and perhaps even a trailer on it as well, because it is going to take longer to stop in an emergency. Avoid driving in the blind spots of other vehicles, especially trucks. Try and be courteous toward fellow road users. And this is an important one. Keep your temper and resist the temptation to retaliate. This is often something that we do. Somebody's overtaking us. Somebody's cutting into our lane. They're driving on the yellow shoulder lane and then trying to cut in. And we often see it. Vehicles pull halfway in to stop them from going there because they are trying to express that they are doing something wrong. I can promise you now that person knows they're doing something wrong, and they also do not care. You are just keeping that risk around you. Allow them to pass. Just let them go. If the SAP is not going to do their work, just allow them to handle the actual situation, because it is not your responsibility. So be cautious when driving alone, and also try and avoid stopping in remote areas, because this could possibly be dangerous. But speaking about criminals on the road, you need to remain alert in any area that might present a criminal activity. So there's a lot of places that will have signs for hijacking or smash and grabs. The GPS route that I use sometimes also tells me that this is a high hijack area. And so I can then try and avoid that area as much as possible, especially if it's coming to the later hours in the evening. Then your valuables in your vehicle, rather leave them in the boot of the car or take them with you, but never leave cell phones, wallets in open sight, unattended, or on the seat of your vehicle, because you will just invite criminals into your vehicle. Then recognize the safety of all road users. Unfortunately, it's not just vehicles. And that being said, there are other road users or things on the road that we might need to avoid. So try to recognize potentially dangerous drivers, potentially dangerous pedestrians alongside the road. Try to keep children away from the roads. If you arrive at your holiday destination, make sure the children are not playing in or around or even near public roads, because other drivers might not be as courteous as you are. When walking near traffic, avoid distractions and be visible. Try and use crossing points as much as possible to avoid running across the road because you are not sure of the distance of the vehicle and how fast it's actually coming toward you. Motorists, obviously, as a driver, you must always be aware of pedestrians, animals, even bikers on the road. And obviously, bikers should always drive with their lights on, protective clothing. They should try and also obey the road rules, because oftentimes they're driving on the shoulder or right on the line to try and overtake. And this could be in your blind spot or in a dangerous area with you using a vehicle. Think bike is obviously something that we want to achieve. We always want to give bike users a safety notification when they're driving past us. We want to make sure that they safely can pass us. But if you are a biker, please remember you also need to obey the law. The road rules are also there for you, not just vehicles. So yes, we want to think bike, but bikers, you should also think people. There's other road users on the road, not just yourself. So you should try and not hang out in a biker's or even a vehicle's blind spot or no zone, because if you cannot be seen, it is highly likely that that driver could do something or not do something that could possibly bump you off that bike as well. If you are going to be cycling during your holiday, be extra cautious, obviously, especially if you are going to be using major roads. Remember, when cycling during holidays, there is strength to be found in numbers. So it's very important that you try and keep in groups when you go out cycling. Isolated cyclists are often targeted in specific areas. So don't go on the road alone, rather find a partner to cycle with you. What I normally do is I'll go onto Facebook and I look at local cycling groups of where I'm in. And then I just take a look if the group is legitimate and certain people are on there, perhaps even on my Strava profile. I'll take a look at who's on the Strava, who's in that area, and the certain routes that are being ridden. And then you can reach out to certain cycling groups in that area and perhaps find out when they are going to be cycling during holiday. Because it's such a huge community, you are no doubt bound to find somebody in that area. Then if you are going to go out cycling, please inform family and friends where you're going, when you are perhaps going to be returning. And if you haven't invested in something like a GPS yet, try and get something like that. I know on Strava, it also allows you to tell the person how far you're going so they can actually follow you on your route. Then carry a fully charged cell phone with you. So before you go cycling, make sure your cell phone is charged. The local law requires that you cycle in single file and always with a helmet. I know that sometimes the cycling groups I'm in, they tend to take up entire lanes, sometimes 2 lanes, and it annoys the hell out of me. And so I try not to cycle with them again because they feel that they're the only road users. But if you are a cyclist, please remember, there is a law that governs cyclists, and we also want to be courteous. We do not want to become the hassle for other road users either. So here's a challenge for you. Try and adjust your driving conditions to the environment. Don't retaliate. If it is going to be raining, if it's going to be wet weather, if it's going to be busy on the road or not busy on the road, adjust your driving style. Don't expect others to do that. If there is oil or petrol on the road, this could create slippery surfaces and it could make you skid out of control. So drive knowing what's happening in front of you and always be on the lookout for potential issues. That's why you do not want to be distracted. Obviously, if there is fog, use your headlights on low beam, because if you use it on high beam, fog is just going to blind you away. You're not going to be able to see through it. That's why vehicles rather come with fog lamps, which is underneath the fog to light up the actual road, because you won't be able to use high beams in fog. Then always keep in mind, if you cannot see or operate the vehicle safely, you should not be driving. So if the conditions are too bad, rather avoid driving altogether. Rather just change your plans, because that is sometimes a possibility. You can change your plans. You don't have to always go right at that minute. If your child tends to suffer from motion sickness in the vehicle, it would be a good idea then to help get out the vehicle and get some fresh air. Doing this obviously in a safe manner. You always want to choose an area that is safe to do that. So if you do have to have any emergency stops or accidents, try to avoid stopping on the highway. Rather try and take the next off-ramp on a more public area. Again, if it is possible to do this. You obviously don't want to create more of a risk or more of an accident stopping exactly where you are on the road. And if you have to stop exactly where you are on the road because of circumstances, try and walk back and then put up notifications to warn other road users that there is an accident in front of you. So keep essential roadside equipment with you, as many breakdowns are caused by relatively minor problems. So keep things like first aid kits, tow ropes, warning triangles, your torch, a fire extinguisher. And if there is an accident, determine the extent and then assess whether or not you need to get medical services involved. And remember, most national roads will have numbers on them for the emergency services of that area. Get those in advance. Don't wait for an accident to happen. Take a picture with a camera or mobile phone, and then just to keep it as an accident report, because you may need to have a case number, especially for your insurance companies to file a claim. Get names, addresses, and your normal incident, because you need to have all that information, especially for the SAP to open the case for you. So that's all our reminders for arriving alive, which is our safety thought, obviously, for this week. And as we move into December, following the rest of this week, we can use those same, not all of them, but most of those safe driving measures for our own personal day-to-day lives, as well as our business lives as we go about them. So if you are driving in and around South Africa today, please remember, buckle up, look after yourself and those who are with you in the vehicle. Drive defensively. You might have to drive for other road users, but avoid retaliating on road users that do not obey the road. Then looking at December, coming up next year, we only have, next month rather, we only have 2 more Toolbox Talks. So starting on the 6th of December, we'll have maintenance, tools for life. Obviously, we want to look at maintenance of all of our tools. And then we're going to have a close-out Toolbox Talk. A close-out Toolbox Talk is obviously going to be speaking about how we close down or close up for the year, making sure that everything is sorted out before we take our vacation. Now, if you're not taking vacation time, we will also include some tips for what you can do during that time. Again, 0 is no accident. We look forward to speaking to you next week, and we hope you have a safe week further. Thank you very much.